September 19th, 2015. This is the newsroom. Conservative critics strike back. Cruz, Paul, and others attack president. The Blake Report. Dire need of support needed on reservations. The time is 1:33 p.m. With just 4 days passing since President Obama launched strikes against al-Qaeda in Senegal, conservative Republicans associated with the Tea Party have already launched a large-scale offensive against President Obama and the Democratic Party. Spearheaded by Senator Ted Cruz, Tea Party Republican Senators Mike Lee and Marco Rubio condemned the strikes outside of Dakar last Tuesday, calling for a full investigation into not only the strikes but also on the initial attacks and why we didn't react then and how this happened. While conservatives jumped on the bandwagon with the Dakar incident like the Benghazi incident of 2012, it didn't pick up as much traction due to heavy anti-Republican sentiment during the midterms, which cost the Republican Party many seats in the House and Senate and arguably strengthened the Tea Party among the remaining Senate and House members. Despite the initial failure to verbally criticize the president, now the Republican Party is in full attack mode as candidates condemn the strikes, saying that the president should have consulted Congress and should have taken quicker action. Calls to fire Secretary of State John Kerry were also made by Cruz today, who said that no man is as influential in American foreign policy as the Secretary of State. What did he know, and when did he know it? The American people have the right to know. President Obama was quick to fire back on opponents, saying at a dinner in Baltimore that the United States needed to weigh all of its options. We didn't want to go in blind, not knowing who attacked us and why. The president's approval ratings have held steady at 42%, having briefly peaked in 2014 after the second Republican shutdown to 53% and returned to the 40s after the Dakar incident back in March. Some Republican candidates have been more forgiving than Senator Rand Paul, who is endorsed by Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. Former Utah Governor Jon Huntsman said that the president was merely being careful by not delaying any action and investigating for several months before making a decision. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie called the president's decision-making intelligent. Both have nonetheless said that they would have consulted Congress prior to striking, likely trying to save face, already having a target on their backs for being moderate Republicans. Vice President Joe Biden has so far remained silent on the issue, having yet to return to Washington from campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire this week and attending a fundraiser in New York City last night. President Obama's approval ratings are expected to tick up a bit due to the strikes, but not too much as they remain a divisive issue. September 24th, 2015, live in Davenport, Iowa. This is the newsroom. GOP candidates debate in Iowa. Christie, Paul dominate. Huntsman impresses. Dr. Ben Carson of Maryland endorses Senator Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky. The time is 9:33 p.m. The 8th Republican presidential debate took place earlier tonight in Davenport, Iowa, hosted by Fox News' Shepard Smith, in what was considered by most to be reflective of the Republican Party's internal struggle for an identity, with the initial question being, what would you have done? The candidates answered one by one how they would have responded to the Dakar incident, while, as usual, Senator Rand Paul and Governor Chris Christie reflected the Republican Party's two general attitudes. Paul arguing for not striking, Christie arguing that he would have asked Congress first. Former Utah Governor Jon Huntsman gave an impressive response that has many liberal Republicans and moderate Republicans looking toward the former ambassador as a plausible candidate for president. I'm not saying I would have done what the president did, Huntsman said, noticeably being the only candidate to call President Obama by his title. But with foreign policy, it can't be turned into a political game. Lives are at risk with every decision the president makes, and we must withhold criticism until every fact is known. Had I been in his position, I would have worked with our allies to launch a multilateral attack against Al Qaeda in Senegal. Huntsman's answer on the issue seems to have done the trick to get his campaign the attention it desperately needed, but the debate still nonetheless was Christie and Paul's in the end. Among the issues discussed were Veterans Affairs, the Blake Report, which Huntsman once again took some of the spotlight from, unemployment, the national debt, and the shutdowns, which Governor Christie called the greatest mistake our party went through with. Governor Christie's distance from Washington during that time period has managed to help with his image as a Washington outsider. Other candidates that seemed to shine were Rand Paul himself, who spoke out against the use of drones as the NSA, as well as Governor Mary Fallin, who also addressed the Blake report to some extent, saying that Ms. Blake's report brings up an overlooked issue in our nation's capital, that of the poor conditions on Native American reservations. Shortly after the debate, Dr. Ben Carson, who toyed with a presidential run this year, endorsed Senator Rand Paul. In the polls, though, the big winners tonight were Chris Christie and John Huntsman, who are expected to see a jump in their numbers. But Rand Paul is expected to still be close to first place against Governor Chris Christie in the coming weeks. With Iowa and New Hampshire coming in January, these final debates will be an interesting thing to watch.